So, hello and welcome to the Action Coach Business Spotlight. I'm Lorna McAtear, and with my husband John Bogus, we run Action Coach Cambridge. And what we do is we help business owners across the Cambridge region. Now, today I am absolutely delighted to have with me Dr. Ben Shaw. Now, Ben is the CEO of SwiftDx. So, welcome, Ben.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you with us. So, Ben, let's kick off. Give us some background and tell us about SwiftDx.
So at SwiftDx, we are making the next generation of lateral flow testing. We've been working on lateral flow tests since 2015, just with the real belief that they can be an extremely effective tool that let people take control of their own healthcare, throughout the world in all kinds of different situations where people want to monitor their own healthcare. What we have is a series of novel technologies that massively increase the sensitivity of lateral flow tests. So that allows you to target more different types of disease, but also give higher resolution to understand the details of what you're trying to track, particularly over time. And we've also just now released our first product, which is in a life science product for detecting mycoplasma contamination in cell culture, which is a bacterial contamination that's very hard to detect that can affect people's results when they're doing life science work or drug development. So we're really excited about releasing that product and showing our capability as a medical device producer as we work on our next products.
Okay, so when are you going to have that ready, do you think?
When are we going to have the mycoplasma test ready? It's already it's on the shelves. You can go to our website, you can order it now, which I would encourage everyone to do. It would be great. And our next medical product that's in the pipeline at the moment is a early HIV detection test. So this will allow you to, at the moment, HIV lateral flow tests are fantastic and they're very widely used, but they detect your immune response to the virus, which is about a 4-week delay from when you're actually infectious. So an early detection test would detect the virus directly, and then you would know before you're infectious that you have HIV, and it allows a better tracking of the disease and also better prevention of spread. So that's our next test that should be available in 2025 after we go through a lot of regulatory approval with it.
That's really fascinating stuff, Ben. So where are you based, and what's your team? How many people do you have in your team?
So we're based in the Cambridge Science Park. Initially, so I did my PhD in the Department of Genetics. We're not technically a university spin-out, but we were both researchers at the university, and then we did rent university space for the first period of starting. So we were kind of in a basement, basically, for a while. And then after we did our seed round, which was in 2019, so first we were doing this part-time, well, in our own time, should we say, with our other full-time jobs. And then in 2019, we got a full seed round, which allowed us to move to this lovely facility in the Cambridge Science Park and kind of start building out the team. So we're now 10 people in the full part of the company. Obviously, we use a lot of contractors and for different bits of work as well.
Brilliant. So who are your clients?
Well, so at the moment, we are predominantly operate by fundraising, essentially, and for that we're developing our own products. In terms of our customers for the mycoplasma test, it can be range from large pharmaceutical companies to life science labs. We've only just released it. We're trying to form a nice user base in the local area as well, and work with people to make sure that so far the feedback's been great, but you want to really work into people's systems and have a test that allows them to get maximum value from their work and from what they're doing. So yeah, it's a product that we have a little catalog, and you can just order it directly either off the website. So it's a ready to use consumer product.
Okay, Ben, I have to ask, how did you get into this?
Well, as I mentioned, I was doing my PhD at Cambridge in the genetics department. I hadn't ever thought about business, had never even vaguely crossed my mind in any sense. I was very focused on an academic path. But during my PhD, I think I really loved my PhD. I really did. I did. I was actually doing neuro stem cell development in zebrafish. It was very different. It was about kind of genetic control of stem cells in zebrafish and in mice. I think my overall frustration was maybe about I've always really enjoyed making things and trying to have something tangible, and I didn't find I was being motivated as much as I would like to just by researching. And there's actually Gus, my business partner, who's the inventor of the technology. He had this idea, which again was separate from his research, that he'd been working on in his own time. And when I found out about it, I was like, well, actually, that sounds really exciting. And it sounds like something that I could get my teeth stuck into. And we joined up with the Judge Business School Accelerate program. And that's when I kind of really joined in earnest, although I was still had a different full-time job and we were doing it in kind of evenings. And then, yeah, went on from there.
Okay, so when you were small, what did you want to be when you grew up? When
I was small, I think the first thing I wanted to be was a vet. And then I went and I worked in a vet for my work experience. I think when I was 16 for like a week, and I was like, maybe not so much, thanks. I think I think to be fair though, I think if you saw any job when you're 16 for a week, you're like, oh God, working is actually quite tough, isn't it? But it was a lot of it wasn't maybe as interesting or as glamorous as I had envisioned. I think from that point, I maybe realized that what I really loved was the science aspect. And then I started doing, in my holidays, started doing work experience at different labs after just emailing lots of people. And I really decided I wanted to be a scientist, I think. And I was very set on an academic science path from starting my undergrad, where I was very lucky to go to Oxford. And then from that, went on to my PhD.
Oh wow! And it's all come from there. So, what's been the biggest, the biggest issues that you've overcome then?
I would say naivety is probably my biggest issue I've had to overcome. But I also think that naivety is amazing, because I think sometimes if you know everything all the pain you'd have to go through before you start, you probably would never start anything, would you?
Absolutely.
And, so I think there is a kind of blessing to naivety, but then the other side of it is that everything is always a lot more challenging than you would hope or you expect. And I think one thing about starting a company, especially that is purely based around a long-term revenue strategy and an investment, is you obviously you've got to make timelines, you've got to make cash flows, you've got to make expectations of milestones and deliveries, and you obviously do your best. And then I guess sometimes the naivety is maybe less useful there when you but then at the same time, I think if the investors knew exactly what they were going to have to go through, they wouldn't have invested. So I think in the end maybe it's worked out, but I think it's really tough. Obviously you always want to, I think I've always approached it with a kind of maybe an honesty and transparency about our knowledge and where we are and who we are and what we can deliver. So I think we've always maybe received forgiveness for not always meeting what we expected to, because they know that it came from a genuine place, and we've explained, why maybe it hasn't worked out. That was especially early days when you're balancing maybe another full-time job as well as trying to deliver on enough data to allow you to take the money that would allow you to do it full time. I think that's extremely challenging. I think that would be, I would say, there's just a lot to do, isn't there, when you start a business, especially coming from a scientist. We were really blessed to have the support of the Judge Business School. There's no chance we would have made it through the first year without it, in terms of basic business kind of administration and how to even make timelines, cash flows, and make them in a presentable way to investors is something that had never even crossed my mind before I started doing this. And so it was a huge challenge and a huge kind of mentality shift about how you think about things coming from academia. And finding the right people to support you who you can kind of really trust, I think is massively valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I see it all the time. You know, people go into business because they've got a great product or service, but they don't necessarily know how to run a business. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and finding the right people, you know, surrounding yourself with with the right people to help you is always something that's really, really important. Ben, I have to ask you, the whole COVID situation, how has that impacted your business?
It's an incredibly interesting question for us. You would think that in a way it would all be amazingly good for lateral flow diagnostics. But I think that there's been a lot, in terms of from a purely lateral flow diagnostics point of view, there are some real kind of positives that have come out from it, in that before COVID, whenever we pitched lateral flow as a kind of technology, particularly because lateral flow just hasn't really changed since the 80s in terms of its basic functionality. And so therefore it's seen as a relatively low value, low quality test. So when you're trying to pitch the idea that, well, actually, it's a great core format and you can make high quality tests from it, it's a hard one. People still see it or associate it with maybe lower value and don't see maybe the possible revenue returns from because you're making something that doesn't exist. It's always easier to make an improvement, isn't it, in terms of convincing someone, because you can say, well, there's this thing on the market, sells this many, we're going to make it, and it's going to be faster and cheaper. They're like, okay, great. Well, then that's great. But if you're saying, well, the reason why it's not popular because it doesn't exist yet, it's always quite hard, because I'm sure they hear it all the time. Everybody believes that with what they're doing. So that was really tough, and I think that COVID helped change people's perception.
Yeah,
I didn't have to spend the first 5 minutes of every talk explaining what a lateral flow test was. That was helpful. People already knew what it was. I think the other really important part was there was a belief both in the industry and with industry experts and with investors that members of the public would be unable on the whole to both perform and accurately read and interpret at-home diagnostic tests. And I think that has been, we always believed that people could, and that if you explain it in the right way and give it in the right format, then it can be extremely useful. And I think that has proven to be true. For us personally, it was at a point in our development where we were nowhere near ready making any form of product. So it was really a huge, if I'm honest, it was a huge kind of setback and issue we got. We were renting space in a facility at the university. The university shut down, and we lost our access to that. I actually I took this quite. I turned my own living room in my house into a lab with full, like, proper health and safety insurance, everything. So I was working in my living room lab, much to the displeasure of my wife. I actually changed the flooring and everything on my own expense. Yeah, it was very nice actually. It was quite interesting to be able to. And my commute was very short.
yeah,
And basically from that lab space, we generated the data that we needed to get our first seed round. But we were just about to start some projects with a particular pharmaceutical company, and that just all got closed down. All of the opportunities we kind of generated just stopped in their tracks. So it was really tough. But I think we just tried to be flexible in what we were doing, and just find ways and solutions to let it happen. I guess we were lucky. We had a couple of staff at that point, which we were able to furlough, apart from myself, because I was able to work in my home lab. And we just tried to achieve what we could in that time. I think now we're coming out the other end. There's another interesting effect in that a lot of the investment into lateral flow in the UK, I won't name names in particular, but it has gone into equipment and manufacturing capacity without actually having, in the end, then all of the tests came from international countries. So there was actually very little produced. And well, I'll get told off if I'm sure that some people would disagree with me, but in the end, there was a huge investment into, the machines that print the lateral flow and the way in which it's manufactured, and the output then was very minimal. And then as a result, companies that either floated for large amounts of money, then their value shot down post-COVID now because there aren't the tests to produce, or there are companies in the industry kind of maybe who started during COVID and got a lot of funding in order to develop different types of tests. They're either going out into administration or also kind of desperately seeking funding, and that has created a kind of maybe an atmosphere that's less conducive to funding because obviously people are kind of waiting to see how it shakes out. I think the approach that we took, which some people felt was unwise at the time, was we had some pressures to maybe really sell what we could do in terms of COVID, but we didn't feel that actually it was the right place for us, or that we were in the right place to make promises about tests, and we didn't. And I think that's what I was saying about trying to be very clear about what we can do and then achieving what we say we can do, rather than, and that obviously wasn't great from a funding strategy, but hopefully now it has put us an opportunity that we can take advantage of the climate as it is. We have some leverage because we have some novel tests we can make that other people can't. Then there's a lot of manufacturing capacity of which we can negotiate with to get that made with, and I think it's great. Well, it's great for the industry because we need new tests, but because there's a lot of now infrastructure that has been built up, and it's great for us because so our business model does not include mass manufacturing of the lateral flow tests. We will tech transfer. We do make the mycoplasma test in-house, and we can make that in large quantities, but for our medical test, the plan is to tech transfer that over to other manufacturing capabilities.
Okay, so your biggest learnings in business and life so far, Ben?
I mean, I didn't know the question was coming, and yet I kind of. I don't really know. I feel like, as I discussing this beforehand, and I feel like I am still very much on my learning journey, and I would be very careful to dispense advice because I think one of the things I've learned the most is that I'll say this is one of the coming through the kind of system. There's a lot of systems around to support startup, and there's a lot of variety of quality in the output of those. And it's very hard to tell if you don't know anything about business and someone's telling you something in a very convincing way. You don't know how accurate that is. And I think just learning to even fact check and to make sure and to get the multiple pieces of opinions is important, but then also learning that everybody has an opinion, and you have to just kind of make decisions and go for it in a way in what you believe to be the case. You can kind of take input as much as you can, but ultimately I think there's a real issue with, particularly when you see someone you idolize, a successful company. And I think the human condition is to make correlation and patterns between the actions you took and the success that you've put out. And I think we're very poor reporters of our own success and what leads to success or failure. I think you assume that if you're successful, everything you've done was a good thing to do, and that can sometimes be very hard to pass out. So I think you can't just assume that someone who's successful, every single piece of advice will lead to your success. You have to you can listen and you can learn, but then you have to somehow amalgamate it into and just stick. As I was saying, like during COVID, there was a lot of people who were very successful who were pushing us in certain ways to really go after COVID and the opportunities in maybe money that was, and I think we believe in what we are and who we are and what we're able to deliver, and saying that is good enough and that we should be really stick to what we can do, stick to what we know we can deliver, and build a successful company out of that, rather than being a flash in the pan. And I'm sure some people will say that was a mistake and we could have gotten more funding to do more. But I've also seen the flip side where funding isn't always good, in the sense of, misdirected funding can also lead to long-term damage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, when you're talking about somebody that appears successful, in my experience, and certainly what I found with business owners that I speak to, the path to success is never a straight line. It tends to be very, very squiggly, and also as well as, different people interpret success differently. So, if I say to somebody, well, what does success look like? I'm very rarely going to get the same answer from the same people, from different people. So it's always interesting. Now, you talked there, Ben, about people that you idolize. Who do you take your inspiration from?
It's a good question again. I think there's a lot of, I tend to be quite, there's some companies even locally who I really admire their business model strategy. And there's a company, Outstone Medical is a company that I really like, the breath biopsy. I just find that I like it when people use really effective business models to maximize the output of the really valuable science they're putting in. So I definitely see other companies I look at, especially, well, not just local, but all over. I really, it doesn't matter, they don't need to be directly related, but I think that I really like looking at other companies and seeing how they're doing things and how we can change our focus to do that. I would say that so this is going to come across maybe as, but we've had a step change in the way our company has operated since we've had a new chairman come in, who is someone who, before he became our chairman, we were very much taking his advice and kind of seeing him as a role model. His name is Dennis Kinane, and he is one of the founders of a company called Signpost, who did start up during COVID and very successfully sold a vast number of very good COVID tests and COVID test results to people. And but in terms of his background as a scientist, professor, and businessman, he's someone who we've taken a lot of inspiration from, and we're really proud to have him as part of as a chairman now. He's very active as well. We meet him a couple of times a week, and he's been giving us huge kind of push, and he's really changed the way our attitude is, particularly in terms of developing the product that we now have, the mycoplasma product. Definitely, there was that a lot of that work has happened in the 8 months since he's been involved. So.
Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, it's one thing looking to somebody for inspiration. It's another thing getting them on board with you. So
yeah, no,
well done.
Really pleasing. Yeah, no, and it's been very successful. And he's brought with him a COO that we have now, Gary Carpenter, who has previously taken HIV tests to market as well, and that has given us another sea change in terms of the experience of our executive team. And now we're now just passed off stage 1 audit for ISO 13485 for the production of medical devices. So, and that again has been a system that he's brought into place in the last 6 months. So yeah, I'm feeling very lucky with our executive and board at the moment.
It's interesting that you use the word luck there, Ben. Maybe maybe they bought into your vision and your passion.
Maybe.
I'm sure that's the case rather than
someone's. Yeah, I mean, what can you do? Yeah, it's hard. I think finding those people is really hard, and it's not through. We've always been saying that we wanted these kind of people as part of the company, and we've always been looking. But actually, it's so hard to these people who are really successful and great in the industry. One, there's not vast numbers of those individuals at all, and those individuals, they are much in demand as well. And actually, I think another lesson that we've learned is hiring the wrong person is more damaging than hiring no one. I would say in terms of expansion, it could be, I know it always feels totally like, well, extra pair of hands is always going to be helpful, but it's not. It's genuinely not. And hiring the right people, I'm really pleased with our scientific team as well. We put a lot of resource investment into hiring in terms of actually, interviewing and really kind of doing practical lab experience and bringing people in. and unfortunately not being afraid to maybe lose people if they don't fit the team. And it's really tough. It's not easy at all. I'm not like a I'm quite emotional and I hate it, but I think it's so important, especially with a small team. And I think that so the team is probably the most important thing of the whole company, both executive and lab first as well. That's the core of who we are, is our ability to execute on our scientific. And it's always what we don't. That is what that's what our product is essentially.
Yeah, and you've hit the nail right on the head. You have to have the right people around you, the right bums in the right seats doing the right things. So what's the future of SwiftDx then?
So, well, I mean, our vision is really to be a high quality medical device manufacturer and producer of product, and to sell it under our own brand. And that is a very much everything is focused towards that, not towards necessarily other kind of avenues of exiting. It's really about growing the company to be a successful producer of tests. As part of that, we're fundraising at the moment for our Series A, or for another funding round, whatever you want to call them. Again, trouble for naming them sometimes. We're fundraising at the moment, but in part of, I think it's the normally up until now, fundraising has been a kind of slightly desperate experience for survival, in the sense of money is running out and everything is kind of in R&D, and the only way we can keep going is to take external money. This is the first time in the company history where we're taking funding as a choice route to growth, rather than as an essential to survival. We believe with our current resources we can maintain a successful business without further investment. Okay. With the products that we both have almost ready to launch, or also launch already with the mycoplasma test. So that is, but we want, I think for us, investment will allow us to execute our plans more effectively and to take full advantage of the opportunity that we feel we have with the technologies we have pretty much ready to go into products. But it changes the dynamic hugely. I think no one wants someone who's desperate, do they? I think that's the key. But you can't help it. If you're trying to do something and you're about to run out of money, and it's your job and it's what pays your family's mortgage on the house, and of course you're going to be desperate. And so now to be able to have that kind of freedom to say, we've been so lucky with our investors as well. All of our investors that we've had have added huge value. We've been so lucky in that sense as well, that as you said, in terms of buy-in for the vision about what we're trying to achieve, I think what our investor and shareholders have been incredible, and each one of them has a skill set that's actually really added value in ways that maybe I didn't expect. But looking for the next tranche of funding to be with, again, people who really see the vision, people who will have that kind of, we've got a lot ahead of us in terms of delivering medical devices to markets. It's no mean feat, and to have people who maybe already have those kind of connections or have had that experience as a funding organization, funding companies that have delivered products to the kind of similar markets. Those are the kind of people we're talking to, and I really feel that there's value added there as well as, but it's both. It's not just purely financial, and that's really exciting. Absolutely. And that I do think, I think obviously institutional investment, again, it's a very different state. So up until now, we've been invested in purely by kind of angel investment, so kind of high net worth individuals. So now, moving into institutional investment, it's a very different ballgame, which I really enjoyed actually for the last year or so that we've been targeting that.
That's really interesting. So do you see that maybe funding is going to be one of the challenges going forward then?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, no question. I guess it's as I said, at least it's a challenge in the sense that delivering products to markets and the timescales that we want to do it in. That's the key. Even talking about wanting to deliver our early HIV detection for 2025, that is predominantly a financial issue rather than a technological issue.
Okay.
The cost of clinical trials, the cost of kind of market delivery is that's where the real, what we've spent so far kind of pales in comparison with the peanuts of the money you need to spend to really do that. But obviously the kind of the output of that is hugely valuable. So it's very worthwhile doing. So for us, that will be about speed to market.
Okay.
I do feel, at least we've felt, and I'd be interested to see where your network and how people react, but we felt that there has definitely been a downturn in the amount of immediate funding interest that we've had in the first quarter of this year than from from the last year in general. I think that is, from us, it seems like it's representative of the kind of economic climate in general. I think it may well also be an industry specific thing in terms of people becoming fatigued with these kind of diagnostic options.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thinking back, Ben, what advice would you give your 18-year-old or your younger self if you could do it all again?
I always feel a little bit like I don't know, I'd probably just get it wrong if I tried to interfere. I think, and and probably the lessons I've learned from things that have happened aren't right. But if I could go back in time now, I think I would have made a lot more of the opportunities I had. I think now you kind of appreciate. Maybe I could have had a little bit less late nights and a little bit more paying attention to the early morning lectures. Because you think about you just don't get that opportunity to learn again, do you? And I think that it's undervalued by. I think I'd love it. I'd love to go back to university and just enjoy it again and actually pay more attention rather than maybe messing around a bit too much.
No, but think of the life skills that you learn at university. I mean, if it was all work and no play.
I didn't get any of them either, so I just got right in the middle ground. No, I don't know. I think that maybe PhD I found extremely challenging, but I do, and maybe I'll say, well, in another life, would I recommend someone to do it again? I think academia at the moment is a really difficult environment to progress in, both in terms of opportunities and kind of expected work versus value out, and also just in terms of your ability to kind of maybe to innovate and to kind of execute on delivering things. So would I go back in time and tell myself not to do a PhD? Maybe, but then I think that I gave me the opportunity to, as you said, develop a lot of life skills, a lot of management skills. You're kind of quite, I think everyone's PhD experience is often very different. Every lab you go to, but for me, it was a very independent organization. I think I picked up a lot of skills in terms of how to manage myself and how to manage my time in a less structured environment that have really been valuable to me moving forward in the last like 8 years since then. And so I don't know, basically. But so I think actually, I met my wife while I was doing my PhD. So that would have been a bummer, wouldn't it? So, and that's nice. And my lovely little toddler, so you just don't know, do you? So just go with it, I guess.
Absolutely. I have to ask, Ben, do you still have your living room as a lab?
No. So luckily, when the house that we, as you said, as you may be aware, the Cambridge area is not ideal for housing in terms of being able to afford anything, particularly at that time. So we moved out a little bit and bought a house that was in need of repairs, let's put it that way. So luckily, during the time that I put the lab in, it was pre-repairs, and then since then, I was able to demolish the lab and we've redecorated. So it's all is forgiven, ish.
Yeah, the memory's still there, the trauma of it.
Well, yeah. Well, you would have to ask my very extremely patient one. I think that's the lesson, isn't it? For anyone starting up a company, I think is to have an extremely supportive and understanding well, not just partner, but family, maybe someone, because doing it by yourself would be unpleasant.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to have the support of the good people around you, don't you? So listen, just before we wrap up there, Ben, is there anything else that you want to share?
I think I'm happy with what we covered. I would say if anybody does cell culture, they should get in touch with me and buy some wonderful kits that we're very proud of. And they can contact me through my email, which is ben.shaw@swiftdx.co.uk. They can go through the website, which is swiftdx.co.uk, and there's a very big button directing you to order mycoplasma tests, so you won't get lost there. Yeah, that's great. And yeah, we're always interested in. I'm a big believer in general of trying to maintain our core competency in terms of who we are and what we do. We're good at, we develop technologies, we have protein and protein binding, but then we collaborate with other people to deliver products, right? And that's where I think we really like other companies who maybe have other aspects that they bring to it, and we work together. So there's people in the network who are listening to this who feel that our technology or their technology could be kind of somewhat symbiotic, then please get in touch. And we're always looking for those kind of opportunities and to work with other motivated and like-minded companies.
Brilliant. Well, listen, what I will do, Ben, when I do the write-up that will go out with this recording, I will indeed put on a link to your website and also your email address. So, listen, thank you so much. It's been really fascinating talking to you. It really has been my pleasure, Dr. Ben, and good luck with everything that you do.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.